The hour of 12:30 having arrived, I'm going to call to order the Higher Education Finance and Policy Committee. We have actually 4 new staff this year that were not here last year, so I'm going to, first of all, just name what they do and they can introduce themselves. We have a new fiscal analyst, so if you want to introduce yourself.
Thanks for the warm welcome. My name is Ken Sabry. I started here about 2 weeks ago, so I'm relatively new and looking forward to working and meeting all of you, so thanks for having me.
He does have background in higher education. It's from the University of Minnesota side, so he is familiar with budgets. We have a new research consultant for the DFL caucus.
Members, I'm Andy Pomeroy. I've been with the caucus for a while, but new to this committee. So,
we have also a new research consultant for the GOP caucus.
Thank you. Gabrielle Sujin. I've been with the caucus for a while, but also new to the committee. Thank you.
Welcome. And we have a new page. So why don't you just come up and just introduce yourself quickly.
Hi, I'm Emily Edstrom. I was a page last year and round 2 this year, so excited to be here. Thanks.
Welcome to the committee. The first 2 hearings of the committee this year are going to be overviews of the budget requests of MNSCU and the University of Minnesota. We are not unfamiliar with these. We dealt with these last session. They were not signed into law. The governor has also released his budget requests, and there's a side-by-side in the members' packet of that. We've discussed some overview objectives with both the Republican and the Democratic caucuses of areas of concern. Members are always welcome, I would hope, to bring up anything that they need to bring up, even if it's an individual project that they want to have articulated, that would be fine. So with that, I want to call up the Chancellor Rosenstone. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record. And why don't you begin the presentation? I think the members have everything they need in their packets, but you can tell them, Chancellor, what they should be looking at as you start.
For Chair Pawlowski, members of the committee, first of all, I have a slight cold. It's my turn, so please bear with me today.
Chancellor, if you want to move that mic just a little closer, there you go. That might help. Thank you.
For the record, my name is Stephen Rosenstone. I'm Chancellor of Minnesota State Colleges and Universities. Seated with me today is Trustee Michael Vekich, who's Chair of the Board's Finance and Facilities Committee. There are 3 other members of our Board of Trustees who are here with us today, Trustees Cheryl Dixon, Alfredo Oliveira, and Luis Sundin. Also present with us today are 15 of our college and university presidents, Presidents Adnuga Atawolagan, Richard Davenport, Sue Collins, Richard Hansen, Peggy Kennedy, Larry Lumblatt, Gal O'Kane, Scott Olson, Joe Opatz, Rick Shrub, Lisa Larson, Phil Davis, Jim Johnson, Pat Johns, and Connie Gores. I hope that some of you had a chance earlier today to meet with some of our students at the Posters in St. Paul in the Capitol Rotunda. It's a showcase of undergraduate scholars from our students from our state colleges and universities. And these students have been very eager to share with you and other leaders in the state their research. And if you have a moment to stop by, I'm sure they would appreciate it. We very much appreciate, Mr. Chair, the opportunity to discuss with you today our capital bonding request for 2014. And I want to spend, if you don't mind, 2 or 3 minutes introducing providing an overview of the request. I'm going to call upon Trustee Vekich with your permission in just a moment. And we'll also, with your permission, be inviting Brian Yolitz, Associate Vice Chancellor, who will provide many of the details and respond to many of the detailed questions you're likely to have. This, as you know, is the first time that I've appeared before this committee since last March. And I want to begin by thanking each and every one of you for the work you did last session for education and especially for higher education. Thank you for the support you gave our students. Thank you for the investment you made in leveraged equipment. And thank you for reversing the trend of cuts that have been made to higher education for over a decade. I'd like to begin, Mr. Chair, with your permission by inviting Trustee Vekich to briefly provide you with the Board's perspective on the proposal.
Trustee Vekich, welcome to the committee. You are a familiar face. I would encourage the trustees to attend more of these hearings. To my knowledge, this is the first hearing where we've actually had trustees in this legislative session attend and actively participate, so I would hope that they would continue to do so. There's a great deal at stake in this bonding request, not just in buildings, but in also program, and ensuring that you do provide the very best education for Minnesota. Trustee Vekich, we've had a long and very good relationship. I appreciate you coming today, and I realize you will have to be leaving early because of some family issues, and we hope that those go well. But welcome to the committee, and please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, on behalf of the Board of Trustees of MnSCU, I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to be a part of this discussion today. Today we are presenting our bonding priorities on behalf of our colleges and universities. I would like to convey the Board's commitment to the proposal you will be reviewing. The Chancellor is bringing these campus bonding priorities forward with the full support of the Board, which has unanimously endorsed each element of the request. As part of the deliberations, we have directed Chancellor Rosenstone, campus presidents, and system leaders of our bonding to ensure that the focal point of our bonding request and the focal point of their leadership remains squarely on more than the 430,000 students our colleges and universities serve each year. Our bonding request reflects that focus. As you will see, our request meets our obligations to serve our students. It meets our obligation to deliver graduates required to keep Minnesota businesses and communities economically vibrant and competitive. Let me assure you, this Board is tenacious in our oversight and unyielding in our demand for accountability and results from Chancellor Rosenstone and our campus and system leaders. In the case of bonding, the priorities for our campuses that we will review with you today are the result of an inclusive and rigorous process and driven by our colleges and universities. This process ensures that only the highest priorities are presented to you for consideration. These priorities reflect guidance from the Board on the intent and focus of our funding request, as well as campus-level priorities for capital investment. In addition, we are pleased with our track record of fast, efficient execution on projects that have received legislative approval. In closing, I want to emphasize that our colleges and universities are a tremendous state resource, a resource that needs your support and represents an outstanding investment of state taxpayer dollars. Our campuses are critical to the economic success of Minnesota's regional and local economies. Our colleges and universities offer students from all backgrounds the opportunity to create a better future for themselves and their families. The Board clearly understands the critical role MnSCU plays in ensuring Minnesota's prosperity and that our collective success as a state requires. To fulfill our mission, we now need your support for common sense investments required to maintain the integrity of the buildings where student learning occurs and for targeted capital projects necessary to meet high growth and high demand workforce needs. Mr. Chairman and members, thank you for allowing us to be a part of this discussion, and I will turn this back to Chancellor Rosenstone.
Chancellor Rosenstone.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to invite Associate Vice Chancellor Brian Yolitz to join me, and he'll provide many of the details in the request. Our presentation will follow the slides that we've shared with you directly. I want to briefly share some of the progress we've made since the last time we were together. Over the past year, our colleges and universities awarded nearly 42,000 degrees, diplomas, and certificates. That's a 10.5% increase over the 2009-2010 academic year. We've also seen a 6% increase in the number of our graduates who have found employment in their fields of study. This year, our colleges and universities are serving, as Trustee Vekich mentioned, roughly 430,000 students across Minnesota, 130,000 of which are at work. And they're at work at places where businesses of industry have partnered with us to provide continuing education and customized training. Since we were last together, we've been working closely with the Itasca project. Our campuses are collaborating with DEED, with the Chamber, and with companies large and small across Minnesota to ensure that the graduates that we turn out are prepared for the careers that Minnesota needs to be competitively on the global scale. We are partnering with the Commissioner of Education, Brenda Casilius, to implement the historic legislation that you passed last session to redesign the transition from high school to post-secondary education so more students are prepared for and on our track for post-secondary education in high-demand, high-growth careers. And on the affordability front, we are 1/4 into our scholarship drive, but we have already raised $9 million, nearly 1/2 of our $20 million goal. And to keep taxpayer dollars and tuition focused on the classroom and student success, we are on track to produce the promised $44 million in efficiencies, cost controls, and reallocations for next year. In short, we are committed to ensuring that our colleges and universities remain the lowest cost, highest value post-secondary education option in Minnesota, and we could not have moved forward on any of these fronts without the support that you have provided and the support we've received from Governor Dayton. So again, I say thank you. With that, let me turn directly to our request. 3 priorities have shaped our bonding request. First, provide the practical learning spaces needed to increase student success and prepare students for jobs and careers. Secondly, reduce costs by improving the efficient use of facilities and replacing or eliminating obsolete space. And third, ensure that Minnesota's workforce needs are met by graduates prepared for the jobs of the future, jobs that will keep communities across Minnesota globally competitive. Our request of $234.5 million in general obligation bond funds, in combination with $52 million in college and university funding, will enable a total program of $286.5 million of strategic capital investment that will increase student success. 100% of this request is for projects that will directly benefit students and the quality of their education. We are committed to taking care of our facilities. We are committed to right-sizing our campuses to use space more efficiently, to reduce costs. And as you know, last month, Governor Dayton incorporated many of our priorities into his recommended bonding list, including $114 million in general obligation bonding for MNSCU as part of the $223 million he proposed for all of higher education. We very much appreciate the governor's support. It touches in one way or another 41 of our colleges and university campuses in 38 communities across Minnesota. We are here today to ask your support for the projects before you because of the impact they will have on our students, because they will improve the ability to help students succeed in becoming the creative, highly skilled workforce Minnesota needs to compete globally.
Chancellor, excuse me for a second. Before you proceed, we do need an understanding as you move forward of the fact that we have a comparison of the governor's capital request and your budget here before us. We also, and it's no secret, that there was a tacit agreement last session that the bonding bill would be about $850 million, yet the governor's proposal is $1 billion. Even at the governor's proposal, and we're looking at several projects that he either skipped or funded partially, as we proceed, I hope there's an understanding of what it would mean if some of these projects were not funded at this time or partially funded at this time. And then, what would happen if it was only $850? That would mean that there would be a severe reduction. Is the assumption then that we would move from the bottom up and we would just take from the bottom? Or, because we do think you do a very good job at prioritizing. But numbers are numbers. So as we're having an explanation here, I hope there's an understanding of the numbers we're going to be dealing with this session and how there may be a way to get to $1 billion in a different way without using bonds, and then what support would there be for using another source of revenue to backfill to get to $1 billion, and then what that would mean to you in your request.
Yeah, Chair Pawlowski, those are all very good questions, and we look forward to working with you and Chair Hausman on the details of how that package might be created. The position that I'm sharing with you today is the position that the board has taken based on the scoring that occurred across the campuses over the past year. These are indeed rank ordered. They are indeed the hard choices and the priorities, and we will be asking that as much as possible we respect the priorities that the board has set as a result of that scoring process. We'd be happy as we get either in today's conversation a little further or offline in the weeks ahead to talk about the consequences that will occur from certain projects going unfunded. And those will be severe consequences for our students and for the
Feel free to share any consequences today.
I'd be happy to.
That'd be great.
The investment that is in this proposal is an investment that will impact about 1.6 million square feet. That's about 7% of our campus's 21.7 million square feet of academic space. Half the projects represent renovation and renewal of existing space. This is beyond the HEAPR projects. Only a fifth of the projects beyond HEAPR are dedicated to new space. If fully executed, I'm just putting aside the chair's comments for the moment, but if fully executed, our proposal will reduce our overall footprint by 250,000 square feet. This reduction in square footage will reduce costs and will help us all advance affordability. In closing, I want to note that every project we are proposing, from the most innovative new building with state-of-the-art learning spaces to the most basic cooling and heating repairs, has a direct impact on students. Our proposal impacts all Minnesotans: Central Minnesota, Northwest, Northeast, Metro, Southwest, and Southeast. With that, and your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to turn to Associate Vice Chancellor Brian Yolitz to walk us through the details of the proposal.
Chancellor, and I hope you're staying right where you are. As we walk through the proposal, I'm going to go back to the comparison with the governor. Can you, at any time, give a reason why the governor would have zeroed out some of these proposals? And what would the governor need to put money back into these proposals?
Chair Pawlowski, the generic answer is the governor did not explain to me what his rationale was, and so I can't obviously speak for the governor and wouldn't want to speculate what the governor's judgment was. I share your concern about finding creative ways in which we can work together to bring additional resources beyond bonding capacity to the table to help execute some of these projects. I think we're all waiting to find out what the forecast will be later this week, and again, we look forward to working creatively with you to find ways of resurrecting some of the projects that were skipped over and doing the best we can to execute the program that the board has recommended.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself for the record.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Committee members, my name is Brian Yolitz. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Facilities for Minnesota State College Universities. As Chancellor Rosenstone indicated, Minnesota State College Universities seeks $234 million in state funding to use with $52 million in system financing to execute priority capital investment projects totaling $286 million. Many of you have at your position a bonding book that kind of details individual projects. Inside the front cover is a priority list, as Chancellor noted, is prioritized by our Board of Trustees and advanced to the Legislature and the Governor for consideration. Within these priorities is $136 million for asset preservation through HEAPR work and select demolition of obsolete space. There are 24 major capital investment line items which impact 29 campuses in 26 communities around Minnesota. As a portion of these projects incurred debt service of these projects, it's carried by our colleges and universities. And we recognize that this is an impact on students and the affordability of higher education. If fully funded, again, putting aside the chair's comments earlier, this request increases costs by roughly 62 cents per credit. If the debt service is carried exclusively by tuition, it represents roughly 1/3 of 1% of the average college and university tuition fees for 2014. Said another way, an average full-time student with the colleges and universities with these capital projects, they would see about an $18.60 of their tuition associated with the debt service for these projects. and the average tuition and fees in 2014 was $5,736. And that would be attributable to the debt service if the entire capital program was funded and all the debt service was serviced by tuition.
Mr. Yoltz, I'm going to stay at HEAPR for a second. There's been a great deal of discussion with the constituency groups about HEAPR and the desire to make sure that there is as much put into HEAPR as possible. Yet the governor gave you less than half of your request. So with what's left over, what critical thing would not be funded if you only had $40 million? How many roofs? How many heating and ventilating systems? How many asbestos? How many other items would not be funded if you stayed at $40 million?
Mr. Chair, I know that from our analysis, not every one of our campuses' number one priorities will be serviced at the $40 million level. I believe only 36 campuses will have their HEAPR requirements number one priorities addressed. So there'll be several roofs, mechanical systems, as you described. The whole spectrum of HEAPR would have to be deferred and serviced through other means, either through local campus funds, and I'll talk a bit about that, or through other our major capital projects.
Then it's a good thing we had a very soft winter, so none of those systems would be stressed.
Chair Pawlowski,
Chancellor Rosenstone.
we'd be happy to share with you the precise list of projects that will not get accomplished if indeed we're at $40
Yes,
million.
we're going to need the list at some point and soon.
We'll be happy to
And
provide that.
we need to know by campus and how much.
Yes.
And exactly what it is. If it's a roof, if it's a heating and ventilating system, whatever the need is, we need to know. The other question I would have, at 110, how much would be left in higher education asset need that isn't funded even at 110?
Mr. Chair, my comments in the next coming slides will address the backlog of maintenance. Right now, the backlog of maintenance in our academic facilities is $715 million. We anticipate over the next 5 years that we expect around $440 million worth of new requirements to be coming at our college universities as systems continue to age, our facilities age. Right now, 80% of our academic space was built in 1975 or prior, so we're getting up there, and we need to focus some investment in that area.
I've got one other question on HEAPR. If we stayed at 110, if you did get the 110, you would still have a backlog of projects. This is a question I learned from Lyndon Carlson. Would you have campuses that would be putting up new buildings and yet would still have roofs or heating and ventilating systems that would go unrepaired while you're erecting a new building?
Mr. Chair, we try to balance the needs across the system, the urgency of repair required, as well as the academic programs we're trying to support in certain regions. We've got some great growth at some of our colleges where we do indeed recognize that we need to build additional square footage. So it's a balancing act, and understand that there's some tough decisions that have to be made in that area.
And understand there's a huge concern of ours that if you want a new building where there are pictures and there are shovels and it goes on people's resumes, and then a block over, there's a building that has a leaky roof, or perhaps in some of these buildings were built in the 60s and 70s, and frankly, the windows don't open, they have a corrupted heating and ventilating system, and the air in there is poisonous. I would hope that the priority would be to fix first before you build new. But we'll proceed, and I would hope there'd be an ongoing discussion of this, too, particularly in reference to HEAPR, because fixing these structures is an extremely high priority for us.
Chair Pawlowski,
Chancellor Rosenstone.
we completely agree. It is why it's $110 million. It is why it is the top priority. It is why we want to be as aggressive as we can in moving that $40 million number north, and look forward to working with you to get that to happen. As I say, we'll be sharing the specifics about what will not be done at $40 million.
Okay, thank you. Okay, proceed.
Yes, Mr. Chair. In fact, in terms of the program focus that you'll see before you, 20 of the line item projects focus and address asset preservation, renewal, and repurposing of existing academic facility space. Only 4 of the 24 projects increase footprint this biennium. These priorities are especially needed to better serve students in high-demand, high-impact programs. I'd also like to point out that many of the projects you see before you, you've seen before. 17 of the 24 projects have been in front of the legislature in one way, shape, or form. 8 have been funded in prior bonding bills for design or advanced work, and 9 have been before the legislature at least once before in 2012, and I guess in 2013 for consideration, but were not funded. Every project before you is shovel-ready, pre-designs are complete, and any prior investments for design and preparatory work has been fully executed, and projects are ready to move to the next phase of design or construction and execution. To get a sense of the capital investment request, it's important to understand a bit about the facilities and our footprint. Our colleges and universities play a vital role in every region of our state. We serve 420,000 students through 54 campuses in 47 communities. The campuses total 28 million square feet of facility space. That's roughly 5 malls of America, just scattered at 54 locations around the state. This space represents approximately 1/3 of Minnesota's total facility or public facility space. To manage the space, colleges and universities all have in place facility master plans that we update on a 5-year cycle. The facilities master plans document academic and demographic trends, workforce needs, and the campuses and institutions in the region and how they all work together, how the facilities support delivering on these needs, and what investments are required to support and enhance campus programs. Of our total facility space, 21.7 million, or nearly 80%, directly serves academic purpose and is eligible for capital bonding. The balance is in our revenue fund program and includes residence halls, parking ramps, student unions, wellness and fitness centers, and parking which are not funded by state monies, but they are funded fully by user fees. The vast majority of our academic space, as I noted, Mr. Chair and committee, was built prior to 1975. And as our facilities and their individual systems grow in age, so does the need for investment. We assess the facility condition of our campuses through a tool called FRM, or Facilities Reinvestment Renewal Model, from Sightlines Incorporated. FRM allows our colleges and universities and their facility managers to annually assess the condition of their facilities, the facility space, how much space they have, the replacement costs, the maintenance backlog, anticipated renewal needs, as well as benchmark our facilities against other higher education facilities across the nation. We integrate this work for a system assessment and to aid in developing facility investment strategies. The estimated cost, as I mentioned earlier, for maintenance of our academic facilities has risen to $715 million, with an additional $440 million anticipated over the next 5 years to meet the facility and maintenance needs. In total, this represents $1.2 billion in investments needed to take care of the academic space we already have. Said another way, the average square foot of academic space has an expense associated with maintenance, backlog, and renewal of $52.50. For campus master planning and space utilization measures, we recognize that there are places where our facility space is not entirely aligned with the current and future academic needs of our colleges and universities. In some places, we need to eliminate obsolete space, and in others, we need new space to support programs. The age, condition, and utilization of our existing facility space and its alignment with college and university current and future needs drove the capital investment priorities before you. As I mentioned earlier, this capital request focuses on asset preservation, renewal, and repurposing our existing academic space. It's built on an investment strategy of catching up with the backlog of maintenance, and by cutting that backlog in half over the next 10 years, and then addressing or keeping up with the emerging maintenance needs as they come due. College and universities deliver on this strategy through many avenues. First, in terms of local campus funding.
Mr. Yolich, excuse me, Representative Swinski has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of going into the removing obsolete space, we've been having some ongoing conversations with some of my facilities, Minnesota West, and some others talking about kind of the impact of removing some buildings and things like that. And I just want to encourage those conversations to continue as we're trying to, whether that be maintaining those buildings within the system or turning them over to local units of government. I think those are potentially some places that maybe those communities, especially smaller communities, rural communities, where square footage is at a premium. and limited, rather than tearing them down. But if we can find other uses for them, to really try to seek those things out as much as possible.
Mr. Yola, or Chancellor.
With your permission, Chair Pulaski, Representative, thank you. We appreciate the ongoing conversations as well. If there is an alternative use for the facility that will meet a community's need, we want to find that alternative use through our consultation. There are examples of where we have turned over facilities. There are examples where we have sold facilities. There are examples where we've leased facilities to meet broader community needs. All those are options. The most important imperative here is to reduce the costs and protect affordability for students, but also being respectful of the communities as well. So we're continuing to explore those options. We have some meetings set up as well, I believe in Granite Falls in the weeks ahead, and we look forward to deliberations.
Representative?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I just also want to thank the Chancellor for taking the time to come out and spend time on campuses in my district particularly. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chancellor, I'm going to go to demolition for a second since we're on it. Are there any structures on your list right now where there is that conversation taking place, where the city or a private entity would take the structure over and it would be removed from the list?
Chair Pulaski, I'm going to
Chancellor?
ask Mr. Yolitz's help on this. I know in Granite Falls, I spoke with the mayor just earlier this week, I believe, on a meeting that will occur, I hope, next week to begin that conversation. I believe there's others as well.
And I talked with the mayor.
Mr. Yolitz?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I talked with the mayor yesterday afternoon, and I'll be speaking with him again to set up the meeting that the Chancellor just spoke of. We've got a couple of examples where our colleges and universities engage with the local community to find those opportunities. Up in Hibbing, they've had a couple of private daycare providers engage in some conversations, but the cost associated with that, using that space, renovating it for daycare operations, has been prohibitive for those to follow through on that. I believe the Department of Motor Vehicles had a conversation with the college there, but they wanted to utilize the space on a part-time basis, and we just wouldn't work out financially for the college to relieve themselves of the total cost. Other locations, Detroit Lakes and Fergus Falls, have got some ongoing conversations with DEED, as well as adult basic education for potential use of that space. So this initiative has spurred some discussions about use of that space, and we continue to engage those discussions and look forward to more of those in the future.
Chancellor, Mr. Yolitz, I've had 4 members come up to me within the last week, and this issue has come up about utilization of a building that's on the demolition list, so I encourage you to do it. Mr. Yolitz, or Chancellor, I'd like you to address the fact that we've had a discussion with the Capital Investment Committee on the use of general obligation bonds in this particular category. Can you explain why there might be a problem with using general obligation bonds to tear buildings down? Mr. Yolitz?
Mr. Chair, we're still engaged in conversation with MMB and Bond Council. Our understanding is that the resulting product is not capital in nature, and I guess that's the simplest of terms. I guess one perspective could be that the result is a clean slate. However, there is no remaining structure in some cases. So we've got some more work to do in that area and recognize that that's an issue. But we still think it's an important issue in the conversation we need to have, an analysis we need to have ongoing in our spaces for cost of affordability and cost operations.
Chancellor and Mr. Yolitz, we've discussed this, but I'll bring it up now. Can you explain why reserves were not used to remove the worst of these buildings rather than coming to us, that the campuses all have reserves, and this would be a one-time expenditure? So why wouldn't reserves be used instead of coming to the legislature to handle the worst of this list? Obviously not the ones you're in negotiation with, but Chancellor.
Chair Pulaski, members of the committee, very, very good question. The overlay of where the needs are to remove facilities which are obsolete by the campus's master plan for years happens to also be the places where our campuses are most financially stressed, because they're the regions of the state where enrollment trends have put more and more stress on the campuses. Those reserves are not adequate without really putting the campus at risk to cover this cost. That's why it's here as a priority for the legislature. And as Mr. Yolitz suggested, and going back to your earlier comment, Chair Pulaski, this is a place where we're going to have to work creatively to find the resources, given the bonding council's advice on this, to find a way to get these projects to be executed.
Representative Swazinski, you have another question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I guess this may be more of a question to research, but there seems to be some gray area there as far as using general obligation bonds for demolition. But is there room within for the to the college and university funding. So if they're actually using some dollars, the 62 cents per credit or whatever was referred to use that as demolition rather than new construction.
I'll
As a
refer
tool?
back to the Chancellor and Mr. Yolich.
I think that's something we're going to have to together do some research on to make sure that we're consistent with Bonding Council's guidelines on what the appropriate use of funds are.
Chancellor, Mr. Yolich, you know we've had this discussion too, but I want to make sure it's part of what we're discussing today. Representative Hausman and I have discussed at some length the use of cash in these requests, that there would be targeted reasons to use cash, and this would be one area to do it. It would get rid of this whole idea of whether or not you're using GO bonds, and it would be a quick way to get these off the deck. So what we're going to need to see are the reserves on these campuses and that they don't have the capacity to do it. And then I would hope that we would have your assistance in actually advocating with leadership for cash in selected areas here to address this.
Chair Pawlowski, we do indeed look forward to working with you on that.
Okay. Representative Briner.
Chair Pawlowski, would you just take a brief moment and say something about the use of cash in the bonding cycle in past history, so members have, some historical...
Representative Briner, members, cash has been used in past bonding cycles on a selective basis. That's when we've had it. It hasn't been used in a long time because we haven't had it, and that's been our problem. We're anticipating that the forecast is going to give us some flexibility here, and that flexibility is going to be used for targeted needs. Some of these structures do need to be taken down. They're past their usefulness. Some others, though, have, I think, a useful life left ahead of them, and it needs to be encouraged. If the communities are coming forward and they want to use them, then if there's a way to use them, we're going to use them. Some of these structures are not that old, quite frankly, and are still architecturally very attractive. Maybe the insides need work, but the outsides still look pretty good, and the communities want to use them, or they're unique. So cash has been used when we had it. We just haven't had it in so long that we may have that option available. So that's a discussion that the Capital Investment Committee and this committee has had. It would not be something that we would deal with here. It would not be part of our supplemental, but it might be part of the Capital Investment Supplemental. So, any other questions? Yes, Representative Norton.
Thank you. This is just naivete on my part, but you talked about individual campuses, particularly some of the campuses that might have lower enrollment or a harder time filling classes, having smaller reserves. Is there any flexibility within the system to use reserves from the institutions at large or elsewhere and reallocate it, or do you have a very strict rule about reserves staying within the institution?
Chancellor.
Representative Pawlowski, Representative Norton, I will let you be the one to propose that we tap the reserves at Winona State University to help deal with the problem in Wadena or somewhere else in the state. I think we have encouraged our presidents to be very thoughtful about their management of resources, to manage the risks on their campus, to save for the investments they're trying to make, and then to go raid those reserves to solve another campus's problem, I think would create some pushback from members of this committee, not to mention from communities themselves. So I don't think that's an option a path we want to pursue.
Yeah. And Mr. Chair,
Representative Norton.
I understand politically that's extremely difficult, and I'm just trying to react to some of the discussion here, and that if you are going to be forced on the demolition side in particular because of limitations to do something, creativity may be called for.
Yes.
I understand the political sensitivity of taking from one to the other, but we do have a MNSCU system as well as individual campuses, and at some point there is a greater good here, and so I'm just, I was asking the question and I just throw it out for future consideration.
Representative Norton's point's well taken. And we have had a long stretch where we have had no resources at all available, and everything was on the back of either tuition or some type of fee. The exception would have been some of the bonding bills, and even these were restricted because we couldn't raise the money to underwrite the sale of the bonds, frankly. We had to restrict our own bonding bills. I don't think that's an unreasonable request to say that there might be flexibility in system-wide reserves in order to address some of these needs, and it might be something to look at in the future, particularly if this is an ongoing problem. And I was told that it was, that there are going to be more buildings that are going to be in a condition where they may be put on this list. Now, if they're always at a small campus, then you're always coming back to us. But I think MNSCU, in its charting of the future, needs to have a course that addresses needs like this also. And it may need system-wide addressing.
Chair Pulowski,
Chancellor.
Representative Norton, I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the suggestions. I think the other thing we must keep in mind is that the reserves constitute, on most of our campuses, between 1.5 and 2.5 payroll periods. And they're using that to manage all the risk that they have to manage and that we have to manage across the system. Risk from weather, risk from enrollment fluctuations, risk from state investment fluctuations. Everything has to be managed with a pretty narrow margin on the reserve side. So while I appreciate can we think a little differently about how to use reserves for targeted investments on particular campuses, I think we also need to do it in the context of those reserves being very, very narrow margins for the risk we're carrying.
Further questions on this topic? So we still have some questions to be answered as we move forward, but that's good. All right. Mr. Yolis, you want to continue?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Maybe I can answer some of the questions we move forward. First of all, in terms of asset preservation, the board has asked that each of our campuses invest $1 per square foot of their own resources in their academic space. Over the past several years, our colleges and universities have exceeded that expectation of $1 per square foot and invested $29.5 million, or roughly $1.36 in every square foot of their academic space. So they're taking some of the workload in terms of taking care of their space on themselves. HEAPR is another avenue for asset preservation. You know, it's the board's #1 priority at the top of our list. HEAPR request this session is $110 million. That's direct asset preservation of existing space. Half of that would go towards addressing building envelope issues, roofs, walls, windows, and doors. A third would go towards HVAC systems, including boilers, air conditioners, and air handling units. The balance would address electrical and plumbing issues and concerns and some code and compliance issues. And then a little bit would be assessed towards design to prepare for that next cycle of HEAPR requests. We prioritize our HEAPR requests against a relative hierarchy that starts off with life safety issues. If we've got imminent danger to students and faculty, we address those first and they're at the top of our list. If we've got code compliance issues where we've actually got a compliance action against us where fines may exist, or we could find ourselves with potential fines, we try to address those next. Where we have imminent system failures, where we have a workaround, where we don't have a very good workaround, that we expect direct impact on our workforce training programs, that's the next in the line. And then if we've got imminent system failure where we would have degraded academic programming, that's the next in the line, kind of our hierarchy as we go through our analysis of how to do the funding. The bottom of the list is the routine life cycle work that we need to do to update our facilities and the components within each facility.
Representative Yolitz, I'm going to stop you here for a second. I joked a little bit about the winter. However, there is a serious side to this winter. In Winona alone, we have had frozen pipes. On my block, 3 homes, frozen pipes from the faucet all the way to the street that had to be fixed for days at a time. There were 3 compressors at my neighbor's house. How much do you anticipate the winter to have an impact on the expansion of your HEAPR that you didn't anticipate? Are you getting reports now that you're getting things that you couldn't have anticipated except for a winter like this? And is there a cost item or a cost associated with it?
Mr. Chair, I've got 3 elements that we're hearing from our campuses that are impacted by the weather. First of all, we indeed have experienced utility shortfalls, water lines frozen. That has happened almost exclusively off campus, where roads have been plowed and there's no snow cover. So we haven't had anything directly impacting our campuses. We've got one campus that's got a boiler that they're concerned about, and we're looking at rearranging some of our HEAPR current.
How old is that boiler, Mr. Yola? My age of boilers I have a fascination with.
Mr. Chair, I believe it's 40 plus, but
40 plus years?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
It seems that there's a critical need at Minskew every time a boiler hits 40 years. I'm very familiar with the 40-year boiler thing. But how does a boiler not get replaced somewhere before the 40-year mark? Is that just not done?
Mr. Chair, a combination of things. There's some expectation that funding unable to do all the work we want to do. Also, we've got some very good craftsmen that believe that they can keep things going on forever, and some of them are very good. Baling wire and bubble gum sometimes can advance things along.
Well, yeah, but a boiler, it's not wire and bubble gum. You can take your finger and push it through the brick.
In some places, yes.
I'm not going to, you may have mentioned the campus, but were there any new buildings built on that campus over the 40 years before they decided to replace the boilers that were actually set up to support the campus of 40 years ago?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe so.
I hope not. Okay.
Mr. Chair, the other piece, I guess, should advance is we've had some campuses talk about how they've had to, because of the natural gas rationing, if you will, they've had to curtail the use of natural gas and rely on fuel oil, which is more expensive, requires different operations. So those are the three things that we've seen due to the weather, and we're tracking that very closely. Had a phone call with facilities directors yesterday, keeping tabs on those very issues you raised, Mr. Chair.
But, Mr. Yoltz, if you do have a significant number of problems, that would be something we would like to see too. You just saw yesterday that we passed, for the first time since I've been here, a supplemental bill, a finance bill, dealing with propane. And I would assume that if you do have structural problems, you let us know. And bonding bills can be adjusted also too for those types of needs.
Mr. Chair, we'll take you up on your offer very much.
Okay. Okay, proceed.
Indeed, as we recognize, we can't rely exclusively on HEPR to manage the backlog of maintenance that needs to be done in our facilities. We're in the process of executing a guaranteed energy savings contract at St. Cloud State University, where we use the energy savings, the dollars associated with that, to service the facility and debt service associated with financing the facility replacements. Winona State University did the first one in our system about 3 or 4 years ago. They're working their way through that. That served as the test bed for the Department of Commerce's Guaranteed Energy Savings Contract program. St. Cloud State now is in the process of developing the biggest one in the state of Minnesota. We're very excited about where that's going to go and leverage some other people's money or other resources to take care of some of the facility needs. And we've got more work to do in that area. Finally, in terms of our capital projects that you see before you, also address asset preservation. When you include HEPR, our request invests about $180 million in asset preservation and improves basically three-quarters of a million square feet. One could argue that these would be eligible for HEPR, but due to the urgency and the size of the undertaking, we've packaged these as capital projects and sought investment through that avenue. One example of these would be the workforce renovation project at Minneapolis Community Technical College. We will continue on with the project that was originally funded in 2008 and 2012. This project replaces the HVAC system, upgrades portions of their security system, replaces deteriorated masonry work on the exterior, and ultimately reduces operating expenses in their maintenance backlog by $2.7 million. Another example is at North Mankato at South Central College, where the capital project renovates spaces for STEM and healthcare programs, but also replaces 20,000 square feet of roofs, abates asbestos, upgrades and replaces HVAC system and air handlers originally installed in 1968. The project ultimately reduces the campus estimated backlog by $2.9 million. Many of our capital projects include asset preservation elements. Our goal is always to walk away from a construction effort with a truly complete and usable facility ready for students and to serve them well into the future. Removal of obsolete space is an important element of physical plant management and is highlighted in college and university master plans. As the Chancellor noted, we've sold facilities. Minnesota West auctioned off a building and had it removed. Dakota County Technical College is currently in the process of selling some obsolete space in South St. Paul. And colleges and universities lease space out to other agencies. Department of Forestry, and indeed workforce centers are just a couple of examples. We've also included demolition of obsolete space as part of our capital projects. In 2012, demolition was included to make way for new and better space in funded projects at Itasca Community College, Bemidji State University, and Ridgewater College. The request before you has demolition in 6 priority capital projects to make way for better space. As the Chancellor noted, we're also focused on affordability and how facility space impacts operating costs and utilities and capital investment. We're seeking a standalone demolition initiative. We've talked much about it already this afternoon. and the questions about with MMB and bond counsel on how best to proceed with those. But I underscore, I think there's an urgent and compelling need for us to follow on with those conversations, and we intend on doing so. Now, that work would include a demolition of space, reconstruction of any altered walls or connecting pieces to the facility, relocation of any displaced programs, or construction of a facility space where we've got specialized space that can't be accommodated in existing space. We continue to consider options to reduce the cost of education and enhancing affordability imposed by aging facility space. We will pursue alternative uses where there's a positive impact on students and affordability. We will not demolish space where campus leaders identify viable alternatives. Mr. Chair, the capital investment priorities for Minnesota State College Universities address Minnesota's workforce needs. These projects touch on a wide range of programs, but predominantly focus on these major categories. Academic facilities and space supporting business, manufacturing, and trades are enhanced by investments at college and university campuses in Bemidji, St. Paul, Winona, White Bear Lake, and Matamidi, and Anoka. STEM continues to be a prominent need for Minnesota. Capital investment priorities at college university campuses in Red Wing, St. Paul, and North Mankato directly provide better learning environments for studies in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math. Preparing teachers and supporting student success is critical to building and sustaining a highly skilled workforce for Minnesota. Priority projects here in St. Paul and in St. Cloud, Winona, and Fergus Falls invest in facilities and programs that prepare teachers for tomorrow and make students successful today. Capital projects in Duluth, Mankato, Grand Rapids, International Falls, Ely, Hibbing, East Grand Forks, and Winona directly support educating and training Minnesota's health and medical workforce of tomorrow. The MSU Mankato Clinical Science Design, funded in 2012, is ready for construction funding this session. The automotive and transportation sector are supported with investments in academic facilities at campuses in Anoka, Rosemount, Moorhead, and Thief River Falls. The projects at Dakota County and Northland both build upon investments made as part of the fiscal year 2012 bonding session. Mr. Chair and committee members, in summary, Minnesota State College Universities seeks your support in providing $234 million in state funding to use with $52 million in system resources to execute a capital investment program of $286 million. The investment priorities are focused on creating a better future for Minnesota by preserving the academic facilities we have and need, and by creating space that meets Minnesota's workforce needs of the future. Every project is shovel-ready, and with your support and funding, every project will move to the next phase of design or construction. We thank you for your time and attention. Chancellor?
Before you wind up, either the Chancellor or Mr. Yolitz, can you explain the history of debt service and why debt service is used and how effective it's been? And who pays for it?
Chair Pawlowski, members of the committee, state law, I believe, requires that, other than HEAPR, that 1/3 of the cost of a project be handled by our institutions as a match to the state support. So the proposal you have before you to use debt service for the capital projects is consistent with what current statute is.
I understand that.
My supposition would be, and I've run a great risk here at trying to imagine legislative intent when I have the...
Oh, don't imagine. We're pretty good at it.
But my suspicion would be to be able to stretch the bonding capacity of the state further, since there's match, to make sure we're really bringing something to the table as a sign of our good faith that it's a high priority project.
No, I'm not arguing about where it goes. You said the campuses take care of it, so who pays for it then, Chancellor?
There's, Chair Pawlowski, members of the committee, the debt service that we as a system are responsible for is split half and half. Half is covered by the system as a whole, half is covered by the campus where the project's being executed. The campus uses a mix of funds. Some of those funds are the state support that it receives from the legislature. Some of those funds are the tuition that students pay.
So in this case, the system does, and this goes back to Representative Norton's earlier question, absorb system-wide certain costs. But ultimately, though, one individual pays for some of this, and who might that be?
Chair Pulowski, members of the committee, there are two sources of funds that are used to pay the debt service that hits a particular campus. Some of those funds are the state support that you provide us through your allocation, and some of the funds are the tuition that our students pay.
And your supposition about legislative intent. The legislative intent originally was to cut back on the requests of new buildings. How successful has it been?
Chair Pulowski, what I can tell you is that if you look at our request, putting aside HEAPR, we only have 1/5 of the request focused on new buildings. So if you add in HEAPR, it's been very successful. It's slowing down our appetite for new buildings. The board has been very, very clear that a new building is a strategy of last resort. The strategy of first resort is make your existing facility work as best you can. And the only places where you see a request for a new facility are places where we've had extraordinary enrollment growth that cannot be accommodated by an existing facility, or technology changes which cannot be accommodated by a reconfiguration of existing facility. So I think it's been a very effective pressure since I've been on board.
Some of us have been here a little longer, and the original legislative intent was to cut back new buildings. I think it has failed miserably to do that, but it has also added to the burden of both the campus and the student. I was trying to give you a way to say that we should take off that burden, and that should be a new use for a base adjustment, that this $36 million in debt service has not been successful. That actually it's done just the opposite. It's added more to the burden of the campus and the student at a time where that burden was historic and historically bad. So, and I'm not blaming you for the new buildings. There are some I might argue with, but in general, I think you do a good job of selectively saying this is the need and this is where it goes. I wish, though, that Minsky would look at something like this from the standpoint of the people who pay it, and then from what actually happened over the long term since this was put in place. This was not a House position. This was a Senate position. The intent was to cut back new projects. It has not. These bonding bills haven't gotten smaller. They've gotten larger, dramatically larger, for an array of reasons. So I was hoping we could help you. We still might try,
Chair Pulaski,
but I hope we would get some help from you on this and trying to take the burden off the campuses and the students.
Chair Pulowski, I would welcome that help, and indeed, if the legislature wants to change that statute, we would be working with you.
That would be one of the things in an unsession that would be very good. Representative Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if I'm going to be stepping in further debate here. But both on your lovely list of meeting Minnesota's workforce needs and in the governor's budget, one of my local projects is missing. And so I wanted to highlight for the committee, lest we move along and forget it. The Rochester Community and Technical College campus was left off the governor's list, as were, I believe, I think several other members on this very committee's projects.
Yes.
I know you were asked what the governor's intent was, and you don't know and aren't going to say, and I only have my suspicions. But it is a concern. We have a demolition as well, and I know that's been a sensitive subject, but it is definitely a building that needs to be demolished and replaced. It's not only it's project number 11, priority 11 on the list here, for anyone looking in the book. But we have staff sitting in unhealthy and horrible buildings that are old and were poorly built at the time, and they're not doing our staff or our students what they should. We can do better. So I just wanted to remind folks, and I'm sure that was just accidentally left off your slides, that Rochester Community and Technical College wasn't mentioned in those many lists of wonderful projects. But I want this committee to know I'm quite
Martin.
serious about.
And that is the intent of this hearing also, to make sure the impact on higher education is understood when projects are left off the list, for whatever reasons.
Right.
But when they are left off, there are consequences, and those consequences sometimes can be quite severe. So Representative Breinert, I'm sorry, I had circled Representative Norton just by accident, and you're next. You were actually first, but now you're next.
Well, actually, I appreciate being next because Representative Norton started the direction I'd like to, I guess, expand on. And when you talk about consequences when projects are left off, I think it's certainly something our community has been looking at intensely, and that's number 9 on the Minsky priority list is the clinical sciences facility for Minnesota State University Mankato. And when you look at all the criteria, when we talk about high-growth job areas meeting Minnesota's workforce needs, students whose needs aren't being met, expanding enrollment. The enrollment in the clinical sciences has expanded 29%. Course credits have gone up 33%. And our departments are scattered in 6 different buildings across campus because they've grown so much we can't coordinate the services provided to students. And these are areas where hands-on services and expanding technology requirements are really inherent in delivering the kind of education we expect for the future. So the facility being proposed here meets all the requirements of investment that we have in terms of both serving student needs and serving the growth in our economy. So I personally think it's a major mistake to have it off the list, and I hope to encourage my colleagues to look at the project and understand its statewide significance in terms of employment needs in the whole allied health area.
And Mankato is one of the few campuses that also has an engineering program and has a long history of science from the very beginning of our state university system. So it has performed well, and we want to continue to perform well in the future. Representative Nornes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment, I guess. I've also got a project that is way down the list here, number 23, I think it is. So we all can find a list, our projects somewhere maybe here, and some are funded and some aren't. But I guess the comment that I have, I feel real strongly that the state needs to maintain its infrastructure and the buildings. And so I would urge, as this goes forward, that the HEAPR be a priority. If we can't hit the 110, get as close as possible to that. And then, of course, it does then reprioritize the other projects that are on the list here if the size of the total bonding can't be changed. So that would be my only comment, that 40 is way too low. So somewhere
right,
a little less than 110. But I think that's really important to do that. So.
Representative Swinsky, Julick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so it'd be page 4, looking at the backlog of maintenance. So the 5-year, we've got $715 million of backlog, and 5 years is going to be another 440 on top of that. What's that projection looking at beyond that? So what's the 10-year outlook? If we've got 440, we're already at, our average age is going to be 45 years at that point for a vast majority of our buildings plus. At what point, when we talk about individual campus capacity, so if we're doing the 2/3, 1/3 share, what kind of a capacity do we actually have within that system to make gains, and then from the sharing point of the revenue, what could we actually do?
Mr. Yolitz or Chancellor? Mr. Yolitz?
Mr. Chair, Representative, indeed, I would be guessing that the next 5-year chunk would be on the order of another $500 million worth of requirements coming our way. And these are really my best guess. Now, our model doesn't help us with that, but I can certainly take a look at that if you'd like. And the way to address that is through HEAPR. And I think Representative Nornes' comment about $40 million doesn't make a very big dent in that, and that's why we've tried to prioritize. That's why the board has prioritized HEAPR at the top of the list, and we recognize we can't do it all at once, and tried to moderate the request by buying down that backlog over time, over a 10-year process to whittle that down and cut it in half. So HEAPR is the avenue to do that. That HEAPR investment's not driven by the 2/3, 1/3 debt service. HEAPR comes to colleges and universities debt-free, and that kind of gets the moniker of from a student perspective, HEAPR is cheaper. But that's the kind of the different avenues for addressing the backlog.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just Chancellor Rosenstone, thanks for your testimony, and appreciate this. But, do you have, perception in the future, with all the technological distance learning, all those types of things, is there any plans to continue to maintain these 54 campuses? Or are you looking at consolidating some of them in the future? Or what's on the horizon? We know that maintaining all these facilities is very expensive, and maybe they're all necessary, but on the other hand, technology is changing the way education is delivered, especially in the first 2 years and even afterwards. So if you could express some thoughts in that area.
Chancellor?
Chair Pawlowski, representatives, excellent question. The first thing I want to make crystal clear is that we are not backing off on our commitment to serve all the communities we're serving across Minnesota. That is not on the table as long as I am Chancellor. How it is we meet that commitment and meet it in a way that's going to be affordable and excellent is the question before us. I think we sometimes exaggerate how we have a silver bullet with technology that's going to replace faculty, that's going to replace academic advisors, that's going to replace the kind of hands-on education that's necessary in so many of the fields where we're preparing our students. I think the next time we go in for surgery and 8 of the 10 people in that surgical suite come out of one of our colleges or universities, we probably don't want that person having received their training online. We probably want some face-to-face experience with real human beings and the technology that can provide in a facility that mocks and mimics the actual facility they're working in. The same can be said for most of the other technology fields, the health sciences, diesel mechanics, the list goes on and on. And so there's not this silver bullet that just makes space go away, that makes facilities go away, and yet still provide the kind of preparation we want for the careers that students want to have when they leave and the kind of careers that are needed for Minnesota. That being said, we have a large number of our students now taking courses online. But the lion's share of those courses are what we call mixed mode, or a combination of some face-to-face with some online. And so making sure we have the right kind of education that we're providing to our students to meet their needs, and not just assuming that we can just blast through everything and put everybody in front of a computer and deliver the quality we want and prepare them for the careers they want. We sometimes go off a little too far, and we got to pull ourselves back and make sure we understand what faculty really do when they're before our students and what they need to do with the facilities that we provide. So some of the changes, quite frankly, that will occur over the years ahead will be a response to the demographic changes that are occurring in our state, will be a response to the technology that's occurring in our state, and we're beginning to think very aggressively about how to think in new ways about efficient uses of our space. But our commitment to serving all of Minnesota is rock solid, and that's not something we're backing off on.
Representative Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in that presentation, did I hear that you might consolidate a few campuses or not?
Chancellor?
Pawlowski,
Without listing any...
I thought you suggested that we might be able to end this session today in less than the full time.
No, I think I meant the totality of the session, not today's hearing. There's a difference.
Chair Pawlowski, members,
Chancellor.
As you well know, we've been constantly looking for more efficient ways in which we can administer our campuses and meet that commitment to serve all of Minnesota. So, for example, one of the presidents we have here today, Sue Collins, is responsible for 4 campuses, one president, 4 campuses, 13,000 square miles up on the range. As you know, Anoka Community and Technical College, Anoka Community College, Anoka Ramsey Community College, and Anoka Technical College now have one president. We have a temporary situation at Dakota County Technical College and Inver Hills where they're sharing one president, they're collaborating on customized training, they're collaborating on academic programs, they're collaborating on many things. So we're pushing very aggressively to find models where we can drive down costs but yet protect our service to that community and service to students. I think thinking creatively about all that in the years ahead is going to be part of what it means to serve Minnesota and do it in a cost-effective and responsible way. The campus service co-op that we've built over the last several years is taking many of the backroom operations about procurement, about processing student financial aid, about payroll, business practices, and doing it under a model of one team, many campuses in a fashion that are reducing costs. It's the campus service co-op, which is run by the presidents of our colleges and universities, That's part of our thinking going forward. When MnSCU was formed, there were 43 presidents. This year, there are 30 presidents. That's part of thinking differently about how to serve communities, but do it in a cost-effective way. And there will be many more creative ideas as we go forward.
Representative Grenier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one follow-up question yet. So on these bonding requests, are they all subject to the prevailing wage law in the state of Minnesota?
Mr. Yolitz.
Mr. Chair, Representative, indeed, our contracts require prevailing wage be associated with all construction contracts on our campus.
Thank you.
Representative Grenier. Mr. Yolitz, there's been some discussion about bidding process and what's happened to local construction firms with the bidding process. Can you explain how a local firm that may not have the resources of some larger firms but certainly has the expertise would be able to bid on these and actually win the contract? I have had direct complaint about 2 incidents that have occurred where local firms failed who had the expertise but wound up not getting the contract.
Indeed, Mr. Chair, we've sought to provide our campuses with the best tools for them to find the right contractors to service their construction needs. We've put in place some aspects of minimum qualifications associated with a host of issues, ocean safety compliance history, indeed prevailing wage history with the Department of Labor and Industry, also some volume of construction. And indeed, when we draw those lines, the design teams draw those lines, unfortunately some firms end up on one side or the other. We understand there's some legislation in that define, somewhat codify our process independent of our process, and we're exploring that right now to understand what that means to be a responsive bidder, and look forward to some conversations about how that works in the near future.
Also realize, Chancellor, Mr. Yolitz, when a local firm doesn't even bid anymore because they're fed up with the process, that local firm contributes in 100 other ways to that campus and that community, and probably has for generations. When a local firm fails to get it and then finds out that it's a misinterpretation of how the bidding process was presented, the phone calls go directly to members. And there are consequences, again, on what they do for the community from that moment forward, and particularly with your campuses, with which they donate a great deal of time and a great deal of resources, for which they're asking nothing back in return but the fact that they got to contribute. So I would hope that in the future, I'm not asking you to pick a local firm. I'm just asking it to make it fair and to make it clear how those firms can actually compete with much larger and more experienced firms who do this on a regular basis. Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for those comments, Mr. Chair, because that's kind of the direction I was leading. Just with my experience as a school board member on some of these projects, I would parrot some of the comments that Chair Pulowski has made. And, you know, it just seems like our bidding process, and again, I'm a layperson, but having observed a little bit, parrots our property tax simplicity, which we have one of the most complex property tax systems in the nation, is my understanding. So, I mean, there's got to be a way with modern-day technology to streamline these processes, and to the degree, and I'm not just speaking here just to your college campuses alone, but just in general for information, that I agree with the comments Chair Pulowski made. It just gets so convoluted and complicated, and I don't know if it really needs to be that bad, that local people have a very hard time participating, get frustrated, and go someplace else. And to the degree that we can simplify that some way, or put pressure on the system to simplify it somehow, I'd be greatly supportive of. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair Pulowski, I appreciate both of these comments and both of these suggestions. I think they give us some places to work a little harder, and we will do so.
Members, Representative Hausman is going to be here today. She is with President Obama in downtown St. Paul on another rather large capital investment project that spans numerous levels of government. Had she been here, she would have echoed Representative Nornis's comments on HEAPR. she is extremely concerned about the difference between the governor's request and what you have in years of 110. And as I started at the beginning, I'm concerned, too, that if there are any projects, particularly that would be hazardous, that you could not address, frankly, if we knew about it, a new project would be given up to make sure that those projects were funded. So HEPR is a major concern of ours, and in this climate with this winter, if it's exacerbated other issues, we want to know about it too.
Chair Pulaski, we will be following up with you.
Okay. Any further questions? Representative Tyson.
Thank you, Chair Pulaski and Chancellor Rosenstone. Actually, kind of piggybacking off some of the comments you made about health services, I have to put a plug in for St. Cloud State, number 22. Being in the remodeling business and having toured the campus and seeing what their plans are for it, I'm super excited to get this project going. And I understand the numbers and where they're lying. However, if there's ever a chance that this can be brought forward, it would be a great opportunity to use a wonderful building. Their plans to reuse some of the products and highlight the Mississippi River. Awesome, absolutely awesome. Plus, it's the health services, and the St. Cloud area has just been, quite frankly, rocking it in the health services. So, it would be greatly appreciated if we could just try a little harder to get the design phase going. Thank you.
Chancellor.
Chair Pulaski, Representative, we completely agree. It's a spectacular project. Please understand that the projects before you are all our babies. We don't want to sacrifice any of them. They're all important. They all will help move forward the priorities that we've identified and what we're trying to accomplish for our students in the state. It is not me you need to convince on the importance of this project. It ultimately is your colleagues.
And the Chancellor makes a point. The bonding bill failed last year. We are going to need bipartisan support to pass this one. The governor has before us a much larger bonding bill than the agreed-to amount last session between the legislative leaders. There may be a creative way to get to that through using cash. We would hope he could facilitate that agreement. So I would hope all of the members would do exactly what you're doing and say that these projects are needed for a variety of reasons, and that we would get support in this body, and we would also get support in the Senate. Representative Dorholt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And kind of like to second what Representative Tice said, is along with a lot of the projects remind me of commercial, why buy new when slightly used will do. I know Eastman Hall is more than slightly used. It's a beautiful, gorgeous building, but it's nice to see how a lot of these projects are, as we refer to the one in St. Cloud, as a green build, something that's using something that's been mothballed, and see it's a small number there, and we don't want to grow that number anymore. So thank you for, and I'm not.
Representative Darrell, do you have a motion for us at this time?
Sure, Mr. Chair. I move the minutes from April 15th, 2013 be approved.
Representative Darrell moves the minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Thank you, Representative Darrell. And do we have one more person that wants to testify at this point? Dr. Black? Thank you, Chancellor, and Mr. Yost, we're going to be hearing more from you and working with you as this session proceeds. I want to make sure it's understood that once we get a fiscal forecast, things may be moving very fast, as you've already seen yesterday and today with the Tax Committee and with the actions on the floor.
Chair Pulaski, with your permission, I'd just like to thank you and thank members of the committee for a very thoughtful discussion. We have some things we'll be following up with you on, and as the session evolves, we look forward to partnering with you to try to achieve the objectives you've identified today.
We look forward to that, too. Thank you. Welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you. I'm Nancy Black, President of the Interfaculty Organization, representing nearly 4,000 faculty members at the 7 state universities. Good afternoon, Chair Pulaski and committee members. Thank you for this opportunity. I will be brief. The IFO fully supports the MNSCU bonding request. IFO supports HEPR projects as the highest priority. It is prudent management to maintain current facilities and to update them to provide a 21st century education for students. The IFO supports using cash from the budget surplus to supplement borrowing. In particular, the IFO would like to see the legislature provide cash to demolish some of these dilapidated buildings that are no longer useful. Some of these facilities will need to be demolished sooner or later, and demolishing them now would allow MnSCU to reallocate that money now spent on structure maintenance. Some buildings are in such bad condition that they really cannot be used. The IFO would also like the state to consider using cash to pick up the one-third debt service that is now paid by MnSCU. Doing so would reduce MnSCU's operating costs annually and thereby reduce the pressure on student tuition in future years. Thank you very much.
Questions, anyone? Seeing no questions. Mrs. Anderson has reminded me, we have another demolition issue. It's your folders. We need to get out of those folders anything you don't want because we're having trouble fitting them onto the cart, and the cart is beginning to sink under the weight. So if you can take anything you don't want out of those folders and leave them here, we will recycle. Any further questions? Anyone else wishes to testify? Seeing none, meeting is adjourned.